Awesome. Well, hey everybody, this is Grace Dobush with How Interactive Design, fresh from the South by Southwest Interactive Conference, where I happen to meet two dudes who are here with me today chatting. And as people are wont to do at South by Southwest Interactive, you can make all the plans you want to go to certain panels, see certain people, and honestly, you end up meeting random people who end up being super cool, and that's the case with today. I've got Chris Anderson, not that Chris Anderson or the other Chris Anderson, but this Chris Anderson does get into a lot of cool parties. And then we've also got Wyatt McGuire, and these two guys know each other from way back, and they both happen to be working in startups today. And I wanted to talk with them a little bit to record it for posterity because after I met these guys, they came to a session I gave at the craft camp at South by, and we just started talking about startups and designers. And I work for a publication that's all about web design and the designing aspect, and they come from the startup angle and the technology. And we're really talking about how those two sides need to work together better, and what's going on with that. So, Chris, I'll just let you introduce yourself, and Wyatt, just let these people know who you are.
Sure. So yeah, like you said, my name is Chris Anderson. I'm co-founder of a company called FreshOut, and I have an interesting perspective because FreshOut is a web product development agency. So we work with a lot of really cool startups and do everything from design, development, basically take it from concept to launch. And then we launched our own product called Breezy. We're actually launching this week, which is for designers. So I'm kind of play a couple of different hats and have different perspectives on this. But yeah, it was really fun talking the other day. I'm glad we can kind of reconnect and hash through some of this stuff.
Relive the South by magic.
Yeah.
With a little less beer.
Yeah.
I'm Wyatt McGuire. I'm CEO of a company called IdeaTree. We're a custom software company, and I'm also the CEO and co-founder of a company called Correctnicity. We provide a social metric for foresight. Think of it like fantasy football, but for everything else. We allow you to lock in your predictions about politics or entertainment or including sports, and give you a score and tell you how good you are and how right you are when the time comes around.
Cool. So, like I said, I met these two dudes after a panel, and we ended up getting coffee together, and we're just talking about startup culture. And one of the questions I had was, startups are so focused on technology and big ideas. Do startups need designers?
I'll jump in here and affirmatively say yes. Or I should say someone on the team needs to be a designer. It doesn't necessarily have to be a co-founder, but at some point in time, if you're producing a product that's going to be in front of people, design is important. And that seems like an obvious statement, but I can say as a technologist that sometimes it's very easy to overlook that and focus on the functionality, but good functionality displayed poorly is oftentimes ignored, and that can hurt your company just as much as any other mistake.
Yeah, I think really good design is really critical nowadays, just because of, if you look at the consumer market, not to throw out buzz terms, but look at how people live and what their behaviors are and what they're used to. We go on products every day that are designed really, really well, right? We go to Facebook, which has great user experience design. That's debatable in some cases, but we're always going to these top websites that are very, very well designed. So we inherently have a higher perception of what design should be in web products. And I think that aside, it's just imperative, with any web product, you're trying to solve a problem for a user, and you want to make it as seamless, as intuitive, as clean as possible. And without really, really well thought out design as part of the creation process of any product, you're not going to really accomplish that amazing of a product. It might be functional, but unless there's someone there that's guiding the user experience and thinking about, okay, what's our people using this product, what are they going to go through, what steps are they going to take, what challenges are they going to run into, and what problem are we ultimately solving for? If someone's not thinking of that with a design standpoint and really carrying that through, not only just the visual, but with interaction design, it's what happens when they click or mouse over here. You have to really, really be thinking that through. So it's a lot more critical, I think, nowadays where we're at with web technologies and people's expectations on the web than it ever was before, even like 5, 10 years ago.
Plus, I mean, there are so many startups and there's so much competition within even the tiniest niches. I mean, the niche of, say, Airbnb-esque like room services. I mean, you have to distinguish yourself, and one good way to do that is with good design.
Well, yeah, and there are numerous studies out there that I could quote, but the important thing to look at really is that you have to scale your design as your company grows too. Like if you're in a phase that's very early, you don't necessarily need to have the most impact, huge, amazing design. You just have to have a functional design. But when you're ready to add customers and when you're ready to scale, you absolutely have to have something that provides mass appeal, and you're not going to have the confidence to have that unless you've tried a design, iterated through the design, gone through a user interface design testing process, and really put it out there for some sort of private consumption before throwing it out there. Design is an artistic process, but it's not just art. There is feedback that goes into it. There is revision that goes into it. And that's a huge part of building any product, especially a web-based product.
And just to chime in, I think it's also a lot more important and has more value in consumer products, and it depends on what type of product it is. Because with web products, that can be, products for businesses like a B2B app or a B2C app, or and there's different audiences within that. For our product, Breezy, it's basically a website editor for creatives. So we preach this whole idea of pixel level control. Graphic designers, creatives can get in there and really customize it exactly the way they want for their site. Obviously, the experience design of the actual application, the product that we have, is immensely important, or people are going to look at it and be like, wait a second, this doesn't, this is for a designer, but it's not even usable. So I think there's a big influx now of consumer products that are just for the broad market out there, and that's a much more picky, design sensitive audience, because again, the expectations are very high, versus B2B products. It's not as important, but it's still really, really important. And I think Wyatt and I have worked on both sides of the fence there. So it's either way, it's grown importance, but certainly for consumer products, very, very important to have like excellent design.
So when you're looking to bring on a designer for a project, what type of skills are you looking for? Do these people need to know how to code?
No, I'll answer first, I guess. It depends on what specific specialization we're looking for. Usually we're not looking for a generalist in most cases. Generalists these days are not nearly as valuable. It's hard to find a place for someone that's just a complete generalist in terms of what they do. We're looking for someone that really, really specializes at illustration, at interface design, at interaction design, at some specific thing, and they're really, really the best at that, because we found through building products for clients that what it takes to build these really, really world-class products is kind of bringing the best of people from different disciplines and facilitating the collaboration so they can work together through the whole flow. Not, okay, engineers and product manager draw up the spec and then throw it over to design and then throw it over to QA or whatever. They have to we try to find the best people to solve whatever problem there is for that product and have them collaborate. So to answer your question, I don't think most designers don't need to code. Where there is a little bit of overlap is when you're looking at people that do front-end development, where they're writing CSS code and JavaScript. It helps for those people to really have a good eye for design and code. But I think if you're talking about straight designers, do they need to acquire these skills? I'd say not unless they're really interested in doing front-end development. They're passionate about it. So I think there's some people out there that definitely straddle both. Usually you're looking at it like a front-end developer, though, and development's a little bit more important, say, than the design. But there's people from kind of all walks and specializations. It just depends on where they're at.
I would send them out with a few courses in JavaScript development. And while that's good and certainly a valuable skill, like Chris said, nobody really wants a jack of all trade. And as a technology company, we can code the pants off of anything, probably more efficient than someone who simply had a couple of courses in programming. But having a designer that's aware of, okay, this is, these are the limits of HTML5 and CSS, which are diminishing as time moves on. I mean, there are a lot of things you can do now that you couldn't do 2 years ago. but just having someone with a little bit of that digital background is pretty much the limits of the requirement. To say that every designer should have to know how to code is overkill. You know, the time of specialists is here, especially in the workplace right now.
Yeah, I missed part of the first part of what you said, Wyatt. But the only thing I was going to throw in there too is that it is important to conceptually understand some of these technologies. Like, you want to understand the fundamentals of how CSS works, how these different technologies work, because that's going to affect how you create your designs. Obviously, you can't do that in a just thinking about design. You have to think about what's the functionality that it's going to have, what are the interactions going to be, and that's why the collaboration piece is so important. But I do think having a conceptual understanding of of that area of development that relates to you and what's actually happening with the product, and knowing what you're trying to accomplish as a team is really important. So, but I don't think you need to necessarily take courses and really learn those skills.
And I think that scales with any medium. Whatever medium you're working in, you need to be aware of the limitations of it and what it can and can't do. So if you have someone that you're asking to design an interaction for the web, and they're throwing tons of full motion video and transitions and bright color changes and things that just really aren't going to work in a web-based environment, that can be very detrimental. You need someone who's aware of what can and can't be done with the limits of the technology that's out there. Not that you should always find yourself constrained by those, and that you shouldn't push to break them if possible, but you should be aware of the difficulty level involved in the medium that you're working with.
And also, I mean, if a developer is suggesting doing something absolutely wild, a designer comes up with some type of wild idea, and the developer says, that is possible, but it's going to take me like an extra 20 hours to actually implement. I mean, having someone who understands the implications of their design, I'm imagining, is super valuable.
Huge, yeah. And especially now with responsive design being one of the latest trends, having someone that understands that this design needs to work not as a static object, but that this is a design that works as a web page or as a phone app or on a tablet, and having the skills and the concept to understand how that works, and to not necessarily code it, but provide the concept of, this is what I'd like my design to look like in this format, this is what I'd like it to look like in this format, and this is what I'd like it to look in this format. Those are important things to be up and aware of. But again, I don't know if I would consider that programming or coding. I would consider that more of just being aware of the technology that you're using.
Right.
So now, just like one last question. I think that designers, have the potential to learn a lot from working in a startup environment. Like, what can a designer expect if they go to work in a startup environment?
I think the first thing is to be challenged, and I know that sounds maybe a little cheesy, but when it comes to a startup, the point is, you're operating in a situation of extreme uncertainty. So the things that you are going to create are going to be, some of them are going to be accepted, but some will be rejected. And that's a huge part that I think is left out of a lot of the artistic experience of design. When you're designing for a gallery, or when you're designing for yourself or a custom piece, oftentimes there's not the testing process that you go through. With a startup, we live and die by data and feedback. So your design will be created, put out there, critiqued, oftentimes negatively, and then revised. But it's a continual process. It's not a one-and-done type thing. But I think what everyone in a startup needs to understand, and sometimes it's really hard to get this, is that that's a good thing. This revision makes not only you better, but your product better. So being able to understand and take constructive criticism, and also to work with the different disparate parts of the company. In a startup, everyone kind of does, or everyone, even with your own focus, is still responsible to help everyone else with their separate roles. So you can't be focused solely on design. You have to be aware that your design may or may not be marketable, and have to change that from the straight art community.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's important you have to kind of take your ego out of it. I think when you work in a startup, you have to understand the kind of terrain that's out there now. What Wyatt was saying, and what the best practices out there now, is this whole idea of being lean, meaning getting to market quickly with your minimal viable product. Getting a product to market, understanding what challenge you're trying to solve, what problem you're trying to solve for the market that you're trying to get this to, and getting it out there quickly, and then, like Wyatt said, iterating, getting that feedback, and being open to change. And I think that's huge for design, and that's where a lot of more traditional designers might need to step out of their comfort zone a little bit, because you have to think about that when you're creating design. You know, is this from the structure of your designs, how they're layered, how they're organized? Are they assets that can be repeatable? You need to really, I think about that a lot and be super open to change, because you're no longer just, you know, designing just to make something pretty. It's, you know, is this solving the problem that we're trying to achieve, and what's the feedback customers are giving? Are they struggling with this? Well, if they are, then we need to rework how this series of steps is happening in whatever process you're doing. So I think being really adaptable and understanding that this whole idea of lean, being a lean startup and working the design part into that is super important.
I also think it's important to look at design as a process of creating the right thing for the right time for the right people. Working in a startup, you can have great ideas that sometimes just aren't taking off. I think perfect example is Steve Jobs. Was working on a tablet PC for years. He was, the father of the Newton, if you remember, way back when, this big clunky thing. And it got rejected, and the entire time in his back pocket, he was revising that after it had been shuttered, and pushed and pushed and pushed until finally the design of the iPad came out. But without the technology to make the iPad as thin as it is and to put the functionality in it, even perfect design wasn't ready for the conditions there. So I think it's important to look at that design and not necessarily take rejection as permanent rejection, but to take rejection as feedback for iteration.
The one other thing I was going to say is that when you're building web products, there's a million different things you can focus on, and I think it's important for the designer to, again, prioritize and spend more time perfecting the design. Whether that's interaction, experience design, illustrations, whatever it is. Focus on the things that are most important, that take the most priority, and don't, again, let your ego get in the way of saying, "Oh, well, I typically specialize in this, and I'm going to focus on this." You need to really look at, collectively as a team, what you're trying to accomplish and prioritize based on that, because it's easy to sink way too much time on things that aren't necessarily the most important parts of your product, the things that your users are going to care the most about. So I think that's the other pieces you have to really prioritize and focus based on that.
And I think it's also important to look at that this is, you're not selling your soul when you take part in this. What you're doing is you're contributing a part of you to a product that other people are contributing a part of them to, and that you're expecting a community to also contribute to. So it becomes a design not just for one person, and it's a design for, everyone that both creates and uses that site. So you're sharing a part of yourself, and you're really finding out what part of you is presentable and attractive to others, and it's also a very self-feedback type loop.
It really seems like web startups are really focusing on collaboration as well. It's not design in a vacuum whatsoever. Oftentimes you've got your developers and your designers working just hand in hand the entire time, because with the pace that things have to move, you just have to go and try and get it as good as you can in a short amount of time.
Right. Every piece of the engine has to work well with every other piece of the engine, or else the entire engine doesn't work. So it's very important to be able to work with executives and to work with developers and to work with accountants. You have to be able to exchange information with every member of the team in order to make the best product. And the only way you can do that is to really be open and honest. There's no room for pride in an organization like that.
Well, thanks so much for chatting with me this afternoon, guys. It was really great meeting you at South by, and I'm sure that I'll see you again next year.
Great talking to you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Grace. Good seeing you guys.